everyone, my name is Nancy Burrell. I'm from Western Washington University, and I'll be presenting some of my team's research on methods of phonological training and its effects on L2 production and confidence. Working with me on this project are Drs. Kirsten Trickey and Jordan Sandoval, as well as students Bram Van Worden, Ellen Golden, Autumn Weiss, and Maria Jose Palacios Figueroa. Our project designing and implementing this phonetics curriculum was spurred by a faculty-led assessment of an upper division Spanish phonetics course at Western. In this assessment, students were found to be largely unaware of English transfer features and the impact of these features on their Spanish speech. Students also expressed a lack of confidence in their ability to communicate with native speakers, as well as a desire to improve their oral skills. Not unlike many other undergraduate programs, Western's beginner and intermediate level courses focus on building vocabulary and familiarity with common grammar structures, while upper division courses focus on writing, literature, and culture. This leaves pronunciation instruction relegated to an upper division phonetics course taken near the end of students' undergraduate careers, where students often arrive with English influence production patterns that are both difficult to perceive and difficult to correct. While instructors expressed a desire to introduce pronunciation instruction earlier in student studies, they cited a lack of accessible pedagogical material for doing so. The goal of our project is to develop these pedagogical materials for teaching pronunciation at the intermediate level to help students understand, identify, and reduce English transfer features in their Spanish productions. By building students' metalinguistic awareness, we hope to increase students' willingness to practice their productions and increase their confidence in their ability to use Spanish outside of the classroom. It's important to point out that since beginning this project, we've begun collecting data that assesses student production, student perceptive abilities, student abilities to assess their productions, and student confidence in communicating with native speakers. This ongoing data collection offers insight into how students respond to phonological instruction and which pedagogical methods are most effective in aiding students to learn these concepts, both of which are useful for our project as well as for future projects and researchers. Explicit phonological instruction and its effectiveness have been popular topics of research in second language acquisition. The contrastive analysis and interlanguage hypotheses suggest that differences between L1 and L2 phonologies cause difficulty in L2 phonological acquisition, while their perception assimilation model and speech learning model suggest that students' improved ability to perceive L2 sounds leads to an increased ability to accurately produce those sounds. These models have informed various studies in L2 pronunciation instruction, including our own, which adopts features of each of these models. Looking at existing research, a number of studies suggest that phonological instruction leads students to more native-like productions. Lord and Camus Oriosun report improvement in the production of segmental features following phonological instruction, while Camus Oriosun and During and Monroe report decreased accentedness and increased comprehensibility of L2 speech after explicit instruction. In addition, Elliott and Nagel report a relationship between students' confidence in their ability to achieve native-like production and the improvements observed in their productions. This idea is where we focus our research goals in trying to give students the tools to assess and practice their Spanish and to feel as though improvement is within their grasp. Beginning the design of our curriculum, we came up with some predictions regarding where students may have trouble in their Spanish productions. Many of these predicted issues were also identified by the instructor of the upper division phonetics course in the assessment motivating this project. We expected to find diphthongization of the mid-vowels A and U, as in sabe and amigo, the reduction of unstressed vowels toward schwa, as in persona, difficulty articulating falling diphthongs, English-like syllabification at the phrase level, including glottal stop epenthesis, and stress syllables that mimic English patterns in being longer, louder, and higher pitched. Moving to our observed difficulties, we used a sample of audio recordings taken from students in a previous intermediate level Spanish course to identify the transfer features that actually appeared most often in our students' speech. Some of those difficulties included inaccurate vowel production, with diphthongization of monophthongs and schwa reduction common. Perceptually, students had difficulty identifying word boundaries in Spanish speech, as well as difficulty classifying the specified phonemes in unstressed positions. In terms of their own confidence, students reported feeling self-conscious about speaking in class and unsure of how to implement pronunciation feedback that they did receive. The goal of our curriculum is to give students a variety of tools that they can use to practice and assess their productions in order to alleviate some of that self-consciousness. In addition, the production and perception difficulties drawn from this pilot study form the basis of our curriculum. Here we've outlined some goals and strategies for our study. Our goals include improving student production accuracy of Spanish phonemes with respect to vowels and consonants, improving suprasegmental features, increasing student confidence, and creating a curriculum that is accessible for both students and faculty. In designing our materials, we emphasize students' native speaker intuition as to what sounds Spanish-y and what sounds English-y. To make feedback more helpful for students, we introduce linguistic concepts and terminology as needed to give precise and applicable feedback. We also incorporate a variety of tools to contrast English-influenced Spanish speech and native speaker productions, including audio recordings, visual feedback with spectrograms, and tactile feedback with some interactive in-class activities. Our curriculum begins suprasegmental instruction early on to familiarize students with Spanish at the phrasal level earlier in their studies, in order to give them the confidence interacting with Spanish outside of the classroom. Finally, in terms of accessibility, we've used Canvas, our university's learning management system, modules to hold much of our curriculum's material, which makes the curriculum easy to incorporate into existing coursework. Progressing through the curriculum, students are introduced to the phonologies of English and Spanish with explanatory Canvas pages that include contrastive audios of English and Spanish. With Canvas, students have a variety of activities allowing them to practice their perception of native speaker Spanish, as well as their identification of English transfer features in non-native speaker Spanish. In these quizzes, students record themselves speaking and receive instructor feedback on those productions. In-class sessions are led by upper division Spanish and linguistics majors and are focused on providing students a variety of ways to assess their own production, including auditory, visual, and tactile activities. On the right, you can see the basic layout of our curriculum. Instruction begins with segmentals, starting with vowels and moving to consonants. Students then move to instruction on suprasegmentals, where they practice syllabification at the phrasal level and explore dialectical variation. Because the intermediate Spanish courses form a 5-course sequence, some students had already been exposed to the material in a previous class. To minimize repetition, all students took a quiz at the beginning of the quarter that evaluated their familiarity with the material. Based on their performance in this assessment, they were then directed to new content or provided with documents that explained the introductory concepts and basic information about vowels. We used Canvas to coordinate explanatory pages and quizzes. These materials guide students through the key differences between English and Spanish vowels and use audios and examples to illustrate these concepts. In addition to the online coursework, the team of 4 student researchers visited the students' class to give students production, practice, and feedback, as well as to answer questions. These class visits were conducted entirely in Spanish. On the Canvas site, students were primarily tasked with reading introductory material written by the student researchers about the characteristics of Spanish sounds. This material was supplemented with audios of native English speakers, native Spanish speakers, and English-influenced Spanish speech. By comparing the aspects of each, students were meant to gradually develop an understanding for how their own productions differed from those that were more native-like. On this slide, you can see examples of the introductory material on the left, as well as examples of contrastive audios on the right that are used to teach students how to identify English transfer features. To test the effects of our explicit pronunciation instruction, our team assessed baseline recordings taken at the beginning and end of the term from students in 2 sections of an intermediate Spanish course. One section received explicit phonological instruction in addition to the standard curriculum, while the other section was unmodified. The data we've collected is an assessment of vowel formants for each phoneme in the baseline recorded, separated into stressed and unstressed variants. Data was collected by manually recording F1 and F2 values for each individual vowel in the initial and final recordings for both treatment groups. Here we have the text of the baseline recording, which students in both treatment groups recorded at the start and close of the academic term. Throughout the term, students progressed through a series of online modules, quizzes, and in-class activities, similar to those shown on the previous slide. Students also received feedback on their productions from the instructor and student facilitators throughout the quarter. These recordings were analyzed using PROT, and F1 and F2 values for each of the monophthong phonemes were recorded for students' pre- and post-test recordings. We present here analyses of each of the 5 Spanish monophthongs for our control and experimental groups, pre- and post-test. Each of the points on these charts represents an individual phoneme in the Spanish phonemic inventory, marked for training and stress, with red data points representing the pre-test and blue data points representing the post-test. Our format analysis gave us a lot of data, but right now we're going to focus on one of the transfer errors students studied, which is vowel reduction. Experimental subject 8's pre- and post-training productions are charted in the above graph on the left, with red data points signifying pre-test and blue data points signifying post-test. From subject 8's pre- to post-test recording, we see the ah phoneme fronting and decentralizing, indicating movement away from the schwa of English. The u, e, and e phonemes were also raised, while ah was lowered and fronted post-training. Noting that schwa is both a central vowel and one that is notoriously indicative of English transfer, such generalized decentralization demonstrates a more native-like production overall in this participant after training. Here we've juxtaposed subject 8's chart to a native speaker vowel chart. While the native speaker's average formants are presented as stressed and unstressed, not having received any phonological instruction, the plots reveal that subject 8's post-training vowels show movement towards native speaker vowel formants. The vowel that was most indicative of reduction of English transfer features was ah. This chart shows only the ah phoneme production for one of our experimental subjects and illustrates significant fronting of the ah phoneme from the pre to post test, red and blue respectively. The native speaker's average formants for ah are shown superimposed between the red and blue data points for comparison. Although the plot shows that fronting of the ah phoneme went beyond the native speaker's production, this tendency marks a shift away from the pre-test use of schwa in place of ah. This indicates some successful movement towards reduction of English transfer features in our students' productions. We presented only a small subset of our large data pool here, so we'd like to provide some discussion of questions raised as well as some hopes and plans for continuation with this research. With the data we have already compiled, we plan to look more deeply into the effects of this explicit phonological training on a phoneme by phoneme basis. We'll be taking these analyses into consideration to further refine the activities and curriculum we bring to the classroom and provide online. To more accurately understand how student productions changed before and after phonological training, we'll be using our data to investigate voice onset time, lenition of the voiceless plosives, and suprasegmental measures of student productions, such as comprehensibility and accentedness ratings. Moving forward, we want to develop a comparative analysis between our students' productions and the prototypical native speaker productions. This analysis is difficult given the disparities in individual native speaker productions, so we plan to use a larger collection of native speaker recordings to develop a more accurate range for native speaker production of the Spanish vowels. This production variation is also true of student participants who each have their own personal linguistic background. In the future, we will be searching for a way to best take these backgrounds into account, which could look like a pre-study survey or an appropriately designed self-assessment. These are just a few of the directions we see our research going in the near future. As of this spring, the curriculum we've developed spans across 5 intermediate level Spanish courses, with 3 200 level courses and 2 300 level courses. As we've shown, we address segmental and suprasegmental features of Spanish through our Canvas-based content and in-class sessions with upper division Spanish and linguistics majors. As we move forward, we aim to, in addition to those steps mentioned in the previous slide, measure student comprehensibility, accentedness, and fluency. We also hope to develop a curriculum track that serves the need of non-native English speakers, in particular, those needs of heritage Spanish speakers. Lastly, a greater aim of this project has been to fill a gap in pedagogical material by creating a curriculum that is both accessible for students and instructors in terms of both technical linguistic information and easy integration into existing curricula. We hope in the long term that these materials will be available for any beginner and intermediate Spanish course, and that it will be possible to implement with ease by instructors, regardless of their previous experience with linguistics or phonological instruction. Thank you all for listening to our presentation, and please feel free to email with any questions or comments you may have. The following slides hold our citations for this project.